Good evening. You'd think that all the outpouring of nostalgia for the music store HMV might have translated into profits if any of the people complaining about it going into administration actually spent much money there. But isn't that the point? We might love the variety of our high streets and mourn when shops close, but are we going to have to get used to it? How many of us have browsed in a real store and then bought something online at a discount? Do you really miss Woolworths? So what will the slow death of household names mean for the way we shop and the way our towns and cities look? Is the high street finished? Well, Mike Tobin is the boss of a £2 billion data networks group, TelecityGroup, which provides some of the services we use when shopping online. John Vincent is co-founder of Leon, which provides what it calls wholesome fast food on the high street. David Hepworth is a music writer who helped launch magazines like More, Empire, Mojo and Heat, and Kate Hardcastle is a retail consultant. You know, the nostalgia is lovely, isn't it? But it didn't pay the bills, and it never was going to pay the bills. They were always going to get into trouble.
Well, that certainly appears to be the case when they're dealing in a market which so clearly shrunk in recent years, you know, by illegal downloading, by legitimate downloading, by competition for online CD sellers, and in a recession when you're as extended as HMV are on the number of stores they've got, it was very difficult to see them surviving.
And you'll miss it.
Well, I used to work there 30 years ago, and so I'm of that generation who was partly drawn to the high street with the promise of being able to hang about in bookshops and record shops, which are kind of almost like libraries or cathedrals to me. You know what I mean? The whole generation of people just did that in the absence of anything else to do. That's what you like doing, being near the product. I don't think my children feel the same thing at all.
Apart from the fellow who wanted to buy Echo and the Bunnymen, I mean, perhaps most of us won't miss it. I mean, did the internet kill it off, do you think?
Well, I think that's a contributing factor. It's always sad when we hear news like we have today. You know, their family's going to suffer as a result of that. But ultimately, we're going through a structural change of the way we live and work. You know, the internet traffic in Europe is doubling every year. And that's because we're just doing more things online. And we're 9% of Britain's economy now is online.
9%?
9%. And that's the largest in the world, actually. So by definition, a large proportion of that is downloading music, downloading videos, apps.
And are they particularly susceptible, though? I mean, there's some things, as we heard, you can't do on the internet. So, but DVDs and perhaps books are things you certainly can do.
I think you can. You know, the user experience in a record shop, I guess, is listening to the music, apart from the social interaction. And if you look at what's happening on the high street, of course, a lot of the high street stores are being replaced by quality food chains and cafes and coffee shops where people are still coming together, and that social element is still there, but just not in a shop, but in a cafe.
But that may be true, but perhaps you are, however good you are, you're not the target. We go into you because we're going somewhere else to get some shopping. I mean, so you're going to be affected as well, potentially.
I think that the high street is about to face a golden age if the market is allowed to work. There are three structural things. I'll be brief. The first thing is that in a recession, in order for markets to clear, prices need to come down and assets need to reprice. The high street, because rents are fixed and because people's debt is at such a high level, the rents aren't coming down. They're on an upward-only trajectory and are not flexible to bring new people into the high street. So someone's going to have to take a haircut in the economic system in order for rents to be priced at where they should be.
But it might be people like you, it might be people who have got a storefront. It'll be the pension funds and it'll be the banks. So what I'm saying is there's a time bomb where eventually banks are kidding themselves that this real estate is worth a certain amount of money. So landlords have got to reduce
landlords and banks.
Okay.
And the second thing is, very quickly, deregulate the high street so that we allow small traders, market traders, to populate the high street. We are a nation of shopkeepers. And the fact is that Apple, which is one of the most amazing online companies, chooses to have Apple stores that are the highest revenue per square foot in the world. So there is something positive happening in retail. And then all of the people that make their own interesting shirts, shoes, costume jewellery, let them in the high street. It's only structural things that are getting in the way.
Kate, where are you on this then? Do you see this this great golden dawn, or do you see, you know, the bad news, the possibility of 4,000 people might lose their jobs because of HMV and all the other ones that we've covered?
I'd like to stop using the word decline. It's about evolution. It's going to change forever. Our lives have changed forever. We expect everything in 0.001 second now. That is the way we expect communications. We don't write letters, we email, we message each other. Therefore, the consumers are looking for something they don't even understand yet. And it's going to be a centre of socialisation, a centre of cafes, great facilities, and as you've mentioned, retailers that do their jobs brilliantly. And I don't want retailers who do their jobs just adequately anymore.
You say that, but I talked to a very canny retailer who said there is a choice. If you're going to stay on the high street, you either have to provide theatre, some kind of great experience, which you've suggested, or you have to be really cheap.
You have to be the bottom.
And the possibility is it might be, given that we're in a recession, a lot of pretty cheap stores. It will also be charity shops. It might be bookmakers. It will be people, obviously, who can make a profit, but who don't have to face all the problems that you were talking about.
Well, charity shops sometimes are an exception. There are some fantastic charity shops who understand retail theatre as well. But in terms of the cheap price, beware which way you go, because there's a one-way street with that, and that's offering value. It's very hard to get straight back up again.
But isn't that what people are looking for?
I don't think everyone is. I think people are looking for to be stimulated, to enjoy shopping, to get completely hypnotised by it again.
Yeah, I mean, you perhaps would like to be like that. But is that where your pocket goes? Your pocketbook?
My pocket is like everybody else. You know, like I say in a report, it's fragmented the way you spend. You spend in loads of different ways. But one thing that I think is important to say: this is not just about retail. This is also about businesses. And if you take the demise of HMV is an event of huge import to the record business in this country, because shops have not just been places you bought things, they've been places that celebrated things. They've been kind of, as I said earlier, cathedrals to things, the things that made you feel that books or records or fashion or whatever was important.
And you found stuff you didn't know about, as you suggest.
Well, yes, but it also just created, it built value all the time. The retail experience built value. And once that disappears online, it can go out of your mind, because I think the thing about online buying is it's a really good way of buying things. It's a really bad way of selling things. Bringing things to people's attention.
That's your business.
I would hesitate to agree. But the thing is, I think there's more than just the choice of either going to a high street or going online that's happening here. Because if you think about the record industry, that's the topic we started with, but back 15 years ago in 1998, there were 175 million CDs bought in the UK. Last year, there was 69 million bought in the UK, but 30 million downloads. But even together, that's barely half the number of the actual music sales of 15 years ago, because the way we're actually listening is changing. So we mentioned Spotify earlier on. So people are sharing music, they're listening to it one time, they're not buying it anymore.
But where does the person go, either for the experience of opening the book and feeling what the book looks like, or actually seeing the stuff? I mean, in other words, do you think a lot of bricks and mortar stores are going to be like showrooms, where you don't actually take away the product, but you may order it online, but you get to try it out, like a car showroom, perhaps?
Well, I think by the time you've gone to a clothes shop, I think when you've tried it on, there's your impulse buy. You want it there and then. I think you wouldn't go back and then order it and have it delivered later. But I think that there is a very clear distinction between those sorts of shops where you can't actually do it online unless you trust explicitly in the sizing of your garment, and something that you can listen to over the airwaves, or watch over the airwaves, or download quickly.
I think high streets are a defined entity. Shopping centres are managed on the basis where someone can manage the entire estate holistically. In two contrasting examples, the Carnaby estate is managed by Shaftesbury, because they own most of the properties on the Shaftesbury estate. They manage it as an ecosystem very, very well. High Street Ken is much less well off and is declining, because you've got a whole series of individuals not working together. So what we need to understand is the high street is a defined ecosystem, and it will need to be either owned by everyone, or coordination needs to increase to manage that ecosystem.
But people across the country sometimes complain that wherever you are, you get the same stores, one after another. You can always predict where they're going to be. In other words, the high street itself is actually quite boring in some places.
I always call it the vanilla state. When you go into a town or city and think, where am I? Because it's got no identity. But a lot of that work isn't just down to the retailers, that's down to the councils as well. We've got an amazing heritage. I go to Australia and America a lot. They would kill for it. So we've got to try and celebrate that. We've got to make the towns come to life. We've got to make sure the individual independent stores are there, the food and beverage, the socialisation, and then some great stores to go with it. Lazy retail will happen no more. It's got to be about working hard to get consumer demand and keep consumers in store and then sell to them.
But do either of you think, though, that we could go down the American route, which is there are some cities where there are fantastic individual shops, New York, San Francisco and so on. There's a lot of cities where it is all the same. There is an anchor store in a shopping mall, and then you walk down the mall and they're all the same.
I truly think that there are signs of that we've got 200 football pitches worth of out-of-town shopping at the minute in this country. So that's a huge amount of out of town. I really hope we don't just go down that route, because we've got to start celebrating it. But I don't think this is just about the retailers. The point you mentioned about retailers working together and communities working together is vital, though. We've got to start pulling together and stop just talking about demise and finger pointing.
Are we a bit too nostalgic about all this, Mike? In other words, we actually shop one way and we think another, yeah?
I think so. I mean, you know, if you're sitting in a restaurant and you listen to some music and you say, oh, what's that? There's a tremendous value in the impulse purchaser. Right now, if you can Shazam it and find out what that music is and buy it directly with a click, you don't usually worry about whether that's £5 or £6 or £7 a track.
What's interesting is community is what drives the human spirit, and not online community. So where is the record industry making its money? Through concerts.
Absolutely.
Because you want peer-to-peer. So ironically, the biggest growth in music revenues is not online, it's through physical experiences. So if councils relax the music laws, which they sort of have done, and allow restaurants to play music, and where you're not allowed to dance, in Westminster, two people moving rhythmically is called dancing, and you have to stop. If we relax those laws and we free up life again, maybe life will return to our high streets.
But that goes back to the theatre point, though, doesn't it? If you've got to add something and you can't compete in price, then you have to give some kind of
amazing
entertainment
theatre, but it's got the highest revenue per square foot. So you can, it's not like you have to go to Les Miserables and not buy anything. The Apple Store, amazing. Nike Town. Nike Town is a consumer brand, and they've chosen to go onto the high street.
And so has a tiny vinyl record shop called Bleecker Street in New York got the most amazing theatre. So you don't need all the expense.
I think that there's a balance has to be struck here. I think one of the things that works about Apple Store is you're not overfaced with a bewildering variety of products. You're getting one thing. And I think one of the things that went wrong with the mega store deal was it very quickly became overwhelming. You went in there and you no longer felt warm about it. You felt vaguely ill. You were over-choiced, frankly.
So I just wonder very briefly, what do you think the future is for the high street? Do you think the future is going to be shopping malls, online, and a few nice niche retailers?
I think there's an interesting thing we haven't really spoken about, which is not quite the out-of-town malls, but the likes of the Westfields in London, where you're in a city, but you still have that environment around.
That's true in Belfast and other cities.
Exactly,
up
and you have there, you can have skating rinks, you can have cinemas, you can have restaurants, bars, nightlife, and actually the shops are almost the sideshow to the relationship building that goes on within that environment. And I think that's almost like your town centre building up again.
What do you think of it? I'm
not so sure that's ever going to happen in Wakefield and Peterborough. that's my feeling. I've no idea what's going to happen to the high street. I do feel that there will still be record stores and bookstores, but there'll be very targeted, boutique-y destination venues.
For me, it's a combination of all the channels put together and making sure the consumer gets the best offer. They've become the most discerning they've ever been, and therefore that's what they're looking for, and we've got to start delivering that. And therefore you will have tiny stores where you do try something on and you don't take it home that day, because they'll only have one and they'll deliver it to you. But for me, gosh, we've got to get those communities working together.
That sounds like internet shopping with a walk to me.
Well, internet shopping with a touch and feel, because you've still got to be seduced by retail sometimes.
I think a very important point.
One more place where the computer hasn't helped is this is a message to all shopkeepers. Just because there is a software program where you can design your own shop front doesn't mean to say you should. Okay, there are experts at that. That would help. That would help.
We'll leave it on that. Thanks very much.